Welcome to today's episode, where we are diving into setting up and managing Azure Entra ID tenants. Let's explore what an Azure Entra ID tenant is, how to create and manage one, and the differences between multi-tenant and single-tenant configuration. What is an Azure Entra ID tenant? Well, it is a dedicated instance. A tenant in Azure cloud environment is a dedicated instance of Azure Entra ID. It used to be called Azure Active Directory. That actually represents an organization or organizational structure. It is basically used for IAM, Identity and Access Management, which manages users, groups, and permissions within that tenant. Every tenant will have a unique tenant ID. Now, this tenant ID is also globally unique, all right? Not just one region, globally unique. And with this tenant ID, different tenants can identify and find the subject or the primary tenant. Subscription association. Well, a tenant is associated with Azure subscriptions, enabling access to Azure resources. Remember, you can still create a tenant with no subscriptions. You can create users, you can create group, you can create your organizational structure, but without subscription, you cannot deploy resources. So, tenant will be on top. Then you will have a root management group with a subscription, and only then you can deploy resources. So subscriptions are required for Azure resource deployment. Now, multi-tenant support. Yes, Azure actually supports multiple tenants for different organizations within the same Azure environment, or for the same organization with different businesses. It all depends on organization or businesses scenario. Security boundary. Well, tenant do provide isolation. Isolation is the core of every tenant. So it also ensures that isolation between tenants is provided to the organization, protecting the data and the resources from each other. Now, creating and managing tenants in Azure. Well, creating a tenant. This is done through Azure portal, or you can also use CLI like PowerShell or Bash. But you have to sign up for Azure AD instance first. Means you should have an Azure instance. Whenever you create an Azure account, a root tenant, or I will say at least one tenant, is automatically created for you. Now, a tenant is also associated with a unique domain name. For example, you can have your company name .onmicrosoft.com. This is provided by Microsoft. But if you have your own domain, that can also be used. Now, it also requires an administrator account to set up and manage the tenant. Well, when you create an Azure account, you will definitely have at least one account in your tenant. Now you can create more admin accounts in the future. It all depends on your business needs. Now let's move to the next topic, that is managing tenants. Well, here the first topic is user and group management. Well, once you have a tenant, at least there will be one user there. And you will also have one management group. But from that point onward, you can always add, remove, or modify users and groups through Azure portal or even from CLI. Once that is done, now you have to figure out the access control. Here you will configure RBAC to assign roles and permissions or privileges to your users. Maybe they have privilege according to a different department, let's say HR, IT. So basically, you will create your governance structure over here. Then you can also figure out your multi-tenant support, where you can manage multiple tenants via Azure AD B2B collaboration, that is business to business, or even B2C, business to consumer, for external user or maybe contractors. The next is tenant customization. Here you can set up your branding, your policies, and security settings such as strict MFA compliance or conditional access. So basically, you're creating your security layers. And then if we talk about the tenant maintenance, well, you have to monitor the tenant's health and security. And you can do it with Azure Logs and Security Center. Well, Security Center is called Defender for Cloud. Different name, but the same concept. Now, you may also have to perform regular updates and compliance checks to ensure the tenant remains secure moving on in the future. It's not just set up one time and then forget about it. No, continuous auditing is still required. Now let's see multi-tenant versus single-tenant configuration. Well, the architecture. In multi-tenant, multiple customers share the same instance of an app. Remember, multiple customers may simply mean different sub-businesses under just one umbrella. Okay? It need not to be a totally separate customer. But on single-tenant, each customer has a dedicated instance, means everyone is going to use just one tenant umbrella to perform their actions. Resource sharing. Well, resource like database and servers are shared. Yes, they can be shared in multiple tenants. Resources are isolated for each tenant. Means if it is a single tenant, well, the resources are isolated from other tenants for other random organization. Cost efficiency. Well, lower cost due to shared resources. Here, you will have a higher relative cost compared to the multi-tenant in your single-tenant configuration. Customization. Limited customization options per tenant. Full customization for your each tenant. What it means is, when you have multiple tenants, here you have to understand that multiple tenants might require different compliance, different policies. So customization will not be that flexible. But for a single tenant, you are housed in just one location, one organization, one structure. Yes, you will still have policies, but it will be easier to manage. It will be more universal for you. Security and isolation. Well, logical isolation is there, but sharing infrastructure can pose risk. Well, what it means that you may have logical boundaries, logical isolation, but when the resources need to create line of sight, means connections, managing the security of those connections can be more challenging. Here, you have stronger security and isolation as resources are separated. Means if you only have a single tenant, you don't even care about other tenants on Azure shared resources because Azure will keep them separate. Your company will only control and manage one tenant. Scalability. Well, it scales easily for many tenants with less overhead. It simply means that you have more tenants, you have more options to scale out. On the other hand, can be less scalable if we talk about just one tenant due to individual resource management. It means if you only have one tenant and you want to create a scalable infrastructure, you have to do all of that inside just one tenant umbrella, one tenant head, right, overhead. Why? Because whenever you will scale, your tenant's policy will still impact everything you do under just one tenant. Over multi-tenant, yes, you can scale independently. Means some of your business counterpart can scale in a different country. It doesn't matter. They are managing their policies separately. Maintenance. Well, here you have to go for shared updates and maintenance across all tenants. So your IT team will have more work to do. On the other hand, for single tenant, independent updates and maintenance for each tenant. Means you will only take care of your tenant and other tenants will be taken care of by other organizations. You should not care about that. So there is no good or bad here. Single tenant and multi-tenant all depends on your business need. Now we can go to the lab where we will see how to set up and manage Azure Entra ID tenants. Remember, creating Entra ID tenant is super simple and very fast, but how you will manage it, what will you create inside a tenant will take days, weeks, months, and sometimes years. So every tenant can become very complex in the future. So let's go to the lab.
All right, let's check out how you can add extra tenants. So log into your Azure portal and go to your Entra ID. Basically, over here, you will see your tenant ID. Whenever you create your first account with Azure, of course, you will have at least one tenant already there with a root management group. Maybe for your organization, a single tenant is enough to manage your, users, devices, and any features you're using. But if your organization is expanding, you may need multiple tenants to keep an isolation or to keep a boundary in between them. For that, you will go to your Entra and click on Manage Tenants on top. Here, you can add extra tenants. Before I do that, let me show you. In my tenant, the previous one, I already have 31 users and 27 groups, 7 organizations, registered applications, and 9 devices. I want you to focus when we create a new tenant. So I will click on Create. I want to create a tenant. So I will make sure tenant type will be Entra ID. So you will select your Microsoft Entra ID. I need to create a tenant for that. Click on Next. Here, add your name. I will just call it RSP Demo. Or let's call it NITA Demo. Domain will be nita.com. And the location will be Canada. Oh, it's already .com is there. You just add the name. Over here, Microsoft will actually complete it. It's already in use. It should be unique. I'll call it demo NITA. Let's see, I have it. Yes. Click Next and Create. It will take maybe 10 seconds. You just have to go to the captcha and the tenant will be created. Tenant creation in progress. This will take a few minutes. And it's done. So I can just close it. And as you can see, I have a new tenant. Now, how to actually switch to that tenant? On top, if you press on the settings button, eventually you will see your tenant here. For me, it's still not showing up. So let me just refresh the whole page. As you can see, now I can switch to a new tenant. So click on Switch. And if I go to Entra ID here, as you can see, just one user that will be me because I created this tenant, so I will be the owner, and 0 groups. In short, this is actually a brand new tenant and it is isolated from the previous one. And you can start creating your user profiles here. You can start creating your groups. In short, you can start creating your managerial structure. So that is how you create a tenant. Now, how to remove it? Remember, to remove it, you should be the only one who will remove it or someone with the same exact level of privilege. So I will go back to my main tenant, click on Microsoft Entra ID, click on Manage Tenants. I want to remove this one. So I'll click on it and click Delete. Before you delete, Microsoft will make sure that you have removed all the resources from it. So as you can see, everything is green. That means all the prerequisites are cleared. Just this one. So I have to take the privilege. So I will get the privilege. Here we go. And let's refresh it. Yes, so all the prerequisites are cleared. And now I can go ahead and delete this tenant. So that is how you create a tenant and also decommission it.
Welcome back from the lab. I hope now you know how easy it is to create a tenant. That's it. When you create a tenant, you have a totally isolated logical container or box. But remember, I also showed you how to delete a tenant. While deleting, do you remember there were so many prerequisites you have to clear? Means if there is anything inside a tenant, you cannot simply delete it. First, you have to empty out the tenant. Only then you can delete it. So I hope it was clear. Now we can actually summarize this episode. So to wrap up, Azure Entra ID tenants are essential for managing identities, permission, and access within an organization. With single-tenant and multi-tenant configurations, businesses can choose the best setup for their needs. By using tools like Azure AD B2B, business to business, or RBAC configuration, companies or businesses can manage a seamless infrastructure, ensuring both security, collaboration, not both, ensuring security, collaboration, and compliance across all the tenants. So thanks for tuning in. I will see you in the next episode where we will see some more Azure services or components. Stay tuned and take care.